Coming up next on Arizona Horizon, it's the Journalist Roundtable. We look at the week's top stories, including Andy Biggs holding the first rally in his gubernatorial campaign. The Journalist Roundtable, next on Arizona Horizon.
Arizona Horizon is made possible by contributions from the Friends of Arizona PBS, members of your public television station.
Good evening and welcome to Arizona Horizon. I'm Steve Goldstein, filling in for Ted Simons. It's Friday, and that means it's time for the Journalist Roundtable. Joining us tonight, Cameron Sanchez of KJZZ, Dennis Welch of Arizona's Family, and Mark Brody of KJZZ. Thank you all for being here. So Cameron, let's start off with Andy Biggs' first rally last weekend. What stood out for you? I know Turning Point had a big presence there.
Oh yeah, so they were hosting it, and it was actually Turning Point Action, I have to clarify so I don't get in trouble, which is their political arm basically. So they host a lot of these events. It was similar to Trump rallies you might see them hosting. They had a big slate of Republican speakers come on before Biggs and rallied support. So some of them were national figures, like they had Paul Gosar there and Matt Gaetz. And then there were some local figures who were also running for office. So people like Alexander Colladin spoke, and Kimberly Yee, who's currently the treasurer. And then of course Biggs, a lot of it was what you would expect. There's a big focus on Trump, and he pledged to do away with some of the stuff that Hobbs has been doing. Like some of the bills she's vetoed, he promised to bring them back and pass them as soon as possible.
And income tax came up.
And get rid of the income tax, which everybody cheered for.
Yeah, so that seems like not going to happen, or?
You know, we've had a governor before. I don't know if you're old enough to remember Doug Ducey, but we had a governor. Governor a few years, a couple terms, had pledged initially. Remember, he was going to get rid of the income tax until he kind of modified that and said, no, we're going to try to take it down as low as we possibly can. He was never able to kind of get there. He did get down to the flat tax. So I don't know what that's going to be. He's going to have a divided legislature to get that stuff through. We'll see where stuff like that goes. I tell you what kind of stood out for me from the Turning Point rally was the fact that Andy Biggs decided to make an issue of the fact that he has Donald Trump's cell phone number, because I guess in politics these kinds of things matter when Donald Trump is dual endorsed. He's endorsed both of these candidates. We know how important Trump's endorsement is. So now they're trying to separate themselves to show who's closer to Donald Trump. And Andy Biggs, I guess having his personal cell phone number is an indication of that, which was funny because if we go behind the curtain a little bit, I did ask Karen Taylor Robson's people if she had Donald Trump's personal cell phone number. And I got this really political answer, which was weird. It's like, yes, no, whatever, is what you expect. But I got a response from them that said, like, well, she's got a great relationship with Donald Trump, and she's talked with him on her cell phone.
Oh. So we're not sure if he called who.
So, that doesn't answer the question.
Yeah.
So they responded the following day and said, yeah, she does have his cell phone.
Okay.
But, I guess that settles that question in this campaign 15, 16 months ahead of the first votes being cast in that primary.
Well, speaking of 15, 16 months ahead, I love a good poll, Mark.
Yeah.
And Mike Noble, who is ubiquitous, put out a poll that it was definitely margin of error, but had Katie Hobbs with a narrow lead over both Biggs and Karen Taylor Robson. So this early in the game, what do you make of that? Anything?
That we're a really long way out. I really think that's what's to be said about that, because we don't know, of course, who the GOP nominee is going to be, and the way that politics works right now, it used to be things can change from day to day or week to week. Now it's like hour to hour or minute to minute. Yeah. So to try to project what's going to happen even next week is almost impossible.
Surprised at all, though, that Hobbs in both cases got 40% as opposed to a little bit higher than that? Because people know she's running for sure.
The thing, well, yes, except that the number of undecideds in both of those, if memory serves, was also extremely high, which, I guess if you're Katie Hobbs and, 17 or 18, whatever percent it was of people weren't quite sure if they wanted you or the Republican, maybe that's not a great sign, but it also could just be people aren't really just paying attention yet.
Yeah, nor should they. Again, how many months away are we? Well, the thing that stood out for me from that poll was, I would have thought Karen Taylor Robson would do a little bit better with that. I mean, she's spent $20 million over the past 3 years in her first run for governor. She's taken out at least a $2 million ad buy right now, reminding everybody again that she was endorsed by Donald Trump. But she didn't have much of a lead over more support than Andy Biggs or if I remember right too, like Charlie Kirk was also in that poll.
Kimberly Yee, I think, was in that
Kim
poll
Yee
too,
were in that poll. So that really, you have to question the results of that poll, because Charlie Kirk has endorsed Andy Biggs in this race. He is not running, and Kim Yee, as we all know, is running for superintendent Republican.
Yeah, Kirk spoke at the rally too.
Yeah. Cameron, one thing that stood out to me when you mentioned Matt Gaetz. Matt Gaetz is not exactly a shining star in the Republican Party right now. I wouldn't think. I mean, I don't know, but I wouldn't think so. So what are anything, I'm sure in a rally like this was not the case, but I think of some of the negatives for Andy Biggs. To me, I think of January 6th. I think of the fact that he was not necessarily an effective state Senate president, and also, does he have statewide name recognition?
I would say he does have name recognition, and certainly it helps to get through the primary. That sort of rah-rah thing with people like Matt Gaetz and Lauren Boebert who spoke is really valuable in the primary election, and TPUSA goes a long way for stuff like that. So it comes down to the general election, and I think that's the big question for candidates like himself or Kari Lake a few years ago. Very successful early on, and then later, how do you get the people that are independent? How do you get the people that are in the middle that Mark's talking about, the undecideds, and that's really the key. And I agree, I like to keep polls away from me at the best of times.
Mark, it's ancient history, but I think about when Andy Biggs got rolled on Medicaid.
Medicaid expansion, yeah.
And that was where his name was actually out a lot more. Being governor, we know how political that can be. We know how, I mean, Doug Ducey wasn't the most exciting person, but knew behind the scenes how to do it. It does seem like sort of like that's not a strength of Andy Biggs.
Well, I mean, he certainly knows how the process works. I mean, he was in the legislature for a number of years. He was in leadership. He was an appropriations committee chair. But yet, it's interesting you bring up Medicaid expansion, and it seems like depending on how this, the big, beautiful bill debate in the Senate goes, Medicaid could once again be a really big topic of discussion during the next election. And I'm guessing that if he is the nominee, that's something we're going to hear a lot from the Hobbs campaign.
Yeah. Dennis, last thing on this. Musk v. Trump.
Oh boy.
I know it's 16 months and things might change.
The Super Bowl of political beefs.
But okay, so does Elon Musk have Andy Biggs' cell phone number, or vice versa?
I do not know, but Elon Musk was saying that the big beautiful bill was full of pork and all this other stuff. And it was interesting is that Andy Biggs took to X, Elon Musk's social media site. I don't know if you know this, but he owns it. But took that and said that Musk was right about that, and that has created a new issue now in this gubernatorial campaign. Again, 15, 16, 17 months out. I'm sure you guys got the press release from the Karen Taylor Robeson campaign attacking Biggs over this. So it's interesting that this big beef between Elon Musk, the world's richest man, and Donald Trump, arguably the world's most powerful man, has now trickled all the way down into this Republican primary for governor.
It's also interesting that Biggs reposted that. Can we say retweet anymore? I don't even know what the language is. But he re-X'd it, saying it was a problem after he voted for it. Like he voted for the bill. So, and then to say, oh, this is not a good bill. That, to me, that raises some questions. And I think in the minds of a lot of voters, that could raise some questions.
I also didn't love the language that it's almost like, well, why didn't Musk tell us before? Both Biggs and Eli Crane said that. Why didn't he tell us that? It's as if you were going to vote against it because Elon Musk said so. Maybe not the best thing for
Well, I'll say one thing that I think I'll be saying a lot over the next however many months.
16 months, Dennis.
Yeah, which is that I think however public opinion is when we get to the midterm on Donald Trump is going to have a huge amount of sway all the way down the ballot for all of the Republicans. So if Trump is still, like godlike and in everyone's great graces, I think that'll be really great for Republicans. But if people are upset with Trump, I think that will have a huge impact on how they vote regarding Biggs.
Okay. Cameron, let me stick with you on China. Governor Hobbs vetoed a bill that would have prevented the Chinese government from owning a certain percentage of land in Arizona, having a certain level of ownership. Okay. What was this bill intended to do? And I know the Republicans were surprised that Governor Hobbs vetoed it, but what did she have to say?
Well, they say they were surprised that Governor Hobbs vetoed it. So the bill's sponsor is Senator Janae Shamp. She's a Republican, obviously, and she says this is like an issue of national and state security because she doesn't want an enemy of the United States, in this case the People's Republic of China, to be purchasing land that's close to military bases like Luke Air Force Base and then spying on us and relaying that information back and using it against us in some way. When Hobbs vetoed the bill, she put out a statement and said basically that this is not effective at counter-espionage and that the way that the bill is written could lead to other issues like arbitrary enforcement of the law. And I think I was a little bit surprised by how much pushback and blowback there was on social media and even a little bit of national news over that veto. Because frankly, I hadn't been tracking the bill all that much throughout the session. And so then you heard from Senate President Warren Peterson that he wants to bring the bill back for a veto override vote.
Yeah, which doesn't happen very often.
No, it
doesn't succeed very often, let's put it that way. Yeah.
No. It doesn't happen. In fact, you got to go all the way back to 1981, 82, with Bruce Babbitt had a bill over redistricting, I believe, where they rolled him on that. But back to the blowback on that, I think I was surprised by that too. But I think what really started this was Fox, the national news outlet, got a hold of this and saw maybe a chance to put veto, Democrat, China all in the same headline and play some politics. I mean, Arizona, viewers of this show know it's an important swing state. It's always a lot of politics going on. If you can make some political hay out of something like that Governor Hobbs did, they're going to go ahead and do it. Because the other thing I believe in that bill and why Hobbs vetoed it is because China could still buy that land as long as they transfer it or sell it within 3 years. That's why she's saying, look, this is not effective in stopping spies and espionage.
Yeah. One other political item is that Peterson, of course, is running for a different office. Does that make it look like he's tough when it comes to be a law enforcer?
I don't know about that, but it certainly gets his name in the paper. And with the legislature not doing a whole heck of a lot right now, at least publicly, if the Senate gets in the chamber and holds a vote, like, we're all going to be talking about it, because if for no other reason, there's really not much else to talk about right now politically, at least coming from the legislature. So, I mean, he knows people are going to be talking about it and talking about him and talking to him. So, yeah. I mean, it can't hurt in his run for AG.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to say it's a win-win for him, even if he isn't able to pull off the override, because again, he will be talking about it before. The reporters, me, all of us will be in front of him asking him questions afterwards, and regardless of how the vote turns out, those base primary Republican voters will see somebody who is trying to stick it to the governor and trying to take her on.
Yeah. So Cameron, Mark said this offensive thing about how the legislature is not getting much done right now, which, I mean, I do not agree with that.
Apologize.
But let's talk about the state budget a little bit. We had TJ Shope on this program a couple nights ago, who said week to 10 days we should be all set. Are you hearing any real movement on the state budget?
I've heard a few things. I spoke to Kavanaugh yesterday. John Kavanaugh is on he's an appropriations person, so he's been involved in these discussions. He says that things are actually going weirdly well between them and the governor's staff, that they've been meeting very regularly, and that there's a few points where they do have some bipartisan support, things like supporting DPS, maybe raises. But the issue right now, the main issue, seems to be between the House and the Senate. The House and the Senate are not on the same page, even though they're both run by Republicans. And there's a question of what to do with the money. There's one proposal that's a split 90-90-90. Everybody, meaning the House, Senate, and governor, gets $90 million to spend how they want. That was the Senate's kind of idea, but the House isn't a huge fan of it. So it seems like there's not progress there, but there's a possibility that they could pass the budget on the 16th when they come back.
Yeah, that's what I'm hearing too. Is the 16th, when they come back, it's probably going to be that budget week. And again, it's worth reminding everybody, like, every year we go through this kind of exercise. Will they or won't they, get this budget passed before the government shuts down on June 30th or July 1st? And they'll come up with something. Okay. What that looks like, I don't know. There's a couple of big issues, I think, that's still remaining out there. There was a big question about Prop 123, depending on what day. That's the education funding piece. Depending on what day, you talk to someone, they think that's going to get done. The extension is going to get done. It's going to get put on the ballot or not, again. And then I think the Diamondback Stadium bill is another huge issue out there that I think doesn't get done until that budget night. It won't be part in the budget, but it'll be part of those budget bills that get introduced that night.
No, I'd wondered about whether that would actually fit into the budget or not. Yeah.
It seems as though they're two separate issues, but I've been hearing what Dennis said as well, which is that and this is pretty typical, right? Like, the budget gets done and there's sort of like a flood of other bills that have been sort of backed up, waiting for the budget to be done, that come out immediate, like just prior to that, like while they're doing paperwork or whatever, between the House and Senate, or immediately after the budget, sort of these last several bills before they can wrap up.
Finally,
we'll call it budget adjacent.
Okay, oh, nice. So finally, so we're hearing any word about whether Ken Bennett, Rusty Bauer is going to come out and play guitar?
That's a really good question. I hope they do.
Okay.
That'd be awesome.
That's a way to end a section. Cameron, I don't know if we know about Arizona Democrats meeting tomorrow, what they plan to do. We know about the issues with leadership. Are we expecting anything big this weekend as far as, hey, Robert Branscombe, it was nice knowing you, or no?
I mean, the agenda doesn't officially say we're getting rid of Robert Branscombe, but people are speculating about that because obviously it's been an issue since he became chair a few months ago, and things seem to not have gotten any better at all. And it seems like they're going to be talking about some of the ways to change or improve the party and their rules, possibly who's in the party. And they're meeting in Tucson, so I will not be there in person, but I'll be watching to see what happens.
Yeah, and this all started, this questions about Branscombe. It's like he decided to, pick a fight with his two senators from his own party. And, from what I've heard, I've talked to not a whole lot of the PCs in the Democratic Party, but there's some support for that. In Arizona, like one of the traditions here in Arizona is if you're a member of the party and you're a PC, it's like you argue a lot with your own people. Go back to John McCain and the Republicans fight with that. And I think there are some people who are kind of happy to see this guy, this new guy come out here and shake things up. Now, whether or not that translates into, he's safe in his job, I don't know. Could there be enough support that happens at this PC meeting on Saturday to try to move something into a vote? I don't know either. It's going to be fascinating to watch this all play out on Tucson. And like Cameron, I'll probably be watching it on social media because I, too, will not be down there.
Well, this sounds like it's not that exciting a meeting, but what do you think, Mark?
Well, it seems like one of the big issues is going to be, and maybe this determines whether or not Chair Branscombe stays in that job, is the money situation. Right. Because, we heard the party treasurer say that it's possible that the party could run out of money by the end of the year, which is, not what you want if you have important elections coming up in the following year.
Yeah. So, Dennis, are the senators holding out, or Gallego and Kelly, who are, we know what the kind of money Kelly can raise, are they actually just sort of freezing out the party at this point?
I mean, if they're, you got to look at how much money the senators can raise, and we know Mark Kelly's record. They wouldn't have a money problem right now that they're having right now. And from what I've been hearing over the past couple of months, as this thing kind of blossomed or blew up, is Democrats maybe taking a page from the Republican playbook and going to a different party in a different county and running their operations out of that. Because you remember when John McCain was at odds with his own party, they were running stuff for his reelection campaigns out of the Yuma County party. So Democrats may be doing something similar.
Yeah. All right, let's move on to Senator Gallego having comments about trans athletes to a conservative website. It sounded a little bit contradictory to what Democrats tend to say about these things. Cameron, what did he have to say?
So he said that he is concerned about transgender athletes in sports, kids specifically, and that they should, in certain cases, be separated and find other activities to do. And that is definitely a calculated risk to say that, because on the one hand, you're probably offending a lot of people in your own party. That's not the stance Democrats have taken historically. But on the other hand, he's saying something that polls really well with voters. And there's two things, actually. On immigration, he's said a few things that I would consider to be more center or right-wing lately, which is also something that Republicans campaigned on aggressively and were very successful at. Poll after poll has consistently shown that people, even if they support other social issues, gay rights issues, do not approve of the trans kids in sports issue. So in some ways it could be very politically savvy for him to say that, but it certainly made headlines because people are accusing him of pulling a real pivot.
Yeah, well, I'm glad you brought up the immigration point. Hold on one second, because Mark, I think that's an interesting point, because Gallego has said that we've lumped Hispanic males into a certain thing, and they want to be as hardcore on border security. Do you put that in the same sort of category?
I mean, it kind of seems that way, and he's been talking about how his election last year is sort of the model that Democrats need to look at in terms of being able to speak to especially male voters, Hispanic, Latino male voters, and this also comes at the same time that he's getting a lot of media attention for possibly running for president next year or in 3 years.
And you're seeing a lot of people because the Democrats are in the wilderness right now, and they're trying to figure out how to move forward. So you're seeing a lot of people put these ideas out in the political marketplace to see, if voters are liking what they're selling. So you're seeing these different messages out there. And I mention that only because, Ruben Gallego, like it or not, take it serious or not, he is part of the Whisper campaign for that 2028 presidential election cycle. So there's some of that calculation that goes into this. The Democrats, though, I'm talking to as well, like the rank and file folks, not happy with Ruben Gallego on a lot of this stuff because he ran against Kyrsten Sinema, and her policies as a Democrat. She eventually turned independent, but now they're seeing him doing the same things that she was doing, and they don't believe that they voted for that kind of candidate.
Yeah, so we're not recording this or anything. Is Gallego going to run for president in 2028?
He actually told me that he's too short.
Really? I'm surprised he would say that.
He did. He was joking, but he says, I'm too short.
Okay.
He says, people don't vote for people like me for president. I'm like, what do you mean? He says, too short.
Okay. Cameron, less than 2 minutes, but I want to get to your story about the Colorado River. And we're giving Senate President Warren Peterson a lot of attention tonight. He wants to mix in desalination, negotiate with California. What are his ideas there?
So I've been making myself learn more about the Colorado River talks lately. If you didn't know, we're engaged in them, and it's a big deal. I was surprised.
States take water,
water. Yeah. I was surprised to see that President Peterson was going to talk to Trump officials about the Colorado River, and I called him about it because I don't think of him as a water guy, and he said he's trying to become one. Well, at least learning more about it. And he's advocating for, obviously, Arizona to get the best deal possible. But one thing he brought up is infrastructure projects, and not just things like lining canals that we used in the CAP system, but also possibly desal and in California. So the idea could be that maybe if we help build a desal plant in California, we get some of their allocation of Colorado River water, and that helps us. But it's surprising. It's not something I've heard from Tom Bushatsky, for example. He's brought up desal in Mexico, but Mexico is a separate issue. It's also a very different timeline. So definitely something to keep an eye on.
Yeah. Very briefly?
I was just going to say, that's another one of those things that the legislature's not getting a whole lot done on. I know you disagree with that, but not a lot of stuff that's been done on water so far this year. I don't know if anything's going to be coming up here in the final weeks.
Okay. Dennis Welch, Cameron Sanchez, Mark Brody, thank you all for being here. I'm Steve Goldstein in for Ted Simons tonight. Thank you so much for watching.